The Bible tells us that ancient Israel was made up of 12 distinct tribes, stemming from the 12 sons of Jacob, Israel's third patriarch. After King Solomon died, around 933 BC, internal divisions caused the kingdom to split in two. In the north, 10 tribes formed the kingdom of Israel, while in the south, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin formed the kingdom of Judah. These two kingdoms, born from the same roots, then started down their own separate paths, often finding themselves at odds, even in conflict. But, as history always does, it marched relentlessly on. By 722 BC, the mighty Assyrian Empire, like a ferocious beast of the ancient world, crushed the defenses of the northern kingdom of Israel with its unstoppable power. The capital, Samaria, fell after a brutal siege. And even more tragically, to completely break their will to resist, the Assyrians forcibly deported a huge number of people from the kingdom of Israel, relocating them within the Assyrian Empire and to even more distant lands. According to the Bible, these 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel were Asher, Ephraim, Issachar, Naphtali, Manasseh, Reuben, Simeon, Zebulun, Dan, and Gad. Their homeland was devastated, their people driven out. From that point on, the fate of these 10 tribes became like a kite with its string cut, drifting off into the unknown, becoming what history famously calls the Lost 10 Tribes. So where did they go? Did they completely vanish into the mists of history? Or did they somehow, in ways we can't even imagine, manage to keep their lineage and traditions alive in some forgotten corner of the world? Could their descendants still be walking among us today? For over 2,700 years, these questions have captivated historians, archaeologists, theologians, and countless curious people. The backstory. According to the Hebrew Bible, the common ancestor of the Israelite people is Jacob, who was later given the name Israel by God. Jacob had 12 sons, and their names became the names of the 12 tribes of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. Now, here's a little detail. Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, eventually became distinct tribes. And the Levites? Well, they were the priests, so they didn't get their own chunk of land. That's why, when you're counting the tribes with territory, Ephraim and Manasseh are often listed, keeping the total at 12. Guided by God, Jacob's descendants, the Israelites, after their time in Egypt and wandering in the wilderness, finally entered Canaan, the Promised Land. There, they gradually conquered and settled the land, forming a tribal confederation based on these 12 tribes. Each tribe had its own general territory and unique traditions. For several centuries, during the time of the Judges, these tribes, loosely allied, worked together to fend off enemies and keep their faith alive. Later on, facing growing threats from outside, the Israelites called for a king. And so, 3 kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, successively ruled over a united kingdom of Israel. This was a golden age in Israel's history. The nation was strong, its territory expanded, and the magnificent temple was built in Jerusalem. But, like we said at the beginning, after King Solomon, the kingdom split and history took a different turn. Collapse and captivity. The northern kingdom of Israel actually had more land, and it was richer too, with a larger population. But right from the get-go, it faced challenges both from within and without. Internally, kings came and went pretty often, with lots of coups and civil unrest. Politically, it was never as stable as the southern kingdom of Judah. When it came to faith, the northern kingdom also tended to stray from worshiping the one God, setting up its own worship centers and bringing in pagan practices. The prophets saw this as the main reason for its eventual downfall. Meanwhile, on the outside, in the Near East of the 8th century BC, the Assyrian Empire was rising faster than anyone had ever seen, turning into a massive military machine. The Assyrians were notorious for their efficient military, advanced siege tactics, and brutal warfare. For a small kingdom like Israel in the north, Assyria's expansion was a huge threat to its very existence. Around the 730s BC, Pekah, one of the last kings of northern Israel, tried to team up with neighboring countries to fight Assyria. But they were hit hard by the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III, losing a lot of territory and some of their people being carried off. Then, when Hoshea was king, He first submitted to Assyria, but later tried to double-cross them by seeking help from Egypt. This made the Assyrian king Shalmaneser V furious. Around 724 BC, the massive Assyrian army showed up and laid siege to Samaria, the capital of northern Israel, cutting it off completely. Archaeological finds and historical records tell us that Assyrian sieges were incredibly brutal. They'd use giant battering rams, dig tunnels, and build towering siege engines. Samaria held out for about 3 long years, with its soldiers and citizens fighting desperately to the bitter end. But finally, in 722 BC, the city fell. Shalmaneser V's successor, the famous Sargon II, proudly boasted in his palace inscriptions that he had conquered Samaria and carried off its inhabitants. The Assyrian Empire had a standard playbook for dealing with conquered peoples: mass deportation. They would move the elites and most of the population from one area to faraway parts of the empire, and then bring in foreigners from other places. This was all to break up the existing social fabric, crush any resistance, encourage cultural mixing, and ultimately tighten their grip on the empire. According to Sargon II's records, he deported tens of thousands of Israelites to Hala, to Gozan on the Habur River in northeastern Assyria, and to the towns of the Medes. And just like that, these Israelites were forced to leave the homes their families had lived in for generations, beginning a long and sorrowful exile. Their culture, their faith, their very identity as a people, all of it faced an unprecedented test in these foreign lands. The great mystery, theories abound. So, what ultimately happened to these deported northern tribes of Israel? That's the central question people have been tirelessly trying to answer for over 2 millennia. One of the most straightforward and perhaps harshest theories is that most of them, over time, just blended into the powerful Assyrian culture and later Babylonian and Persian cultures. They might have gradually lost their unique language, customs, and faith, eventually dissolving into the melting pot of the Near East's many peoples. History is full of examples like this. When a people loses their homeland and independence, their cultural heritage is at huge risk of being broken. The Assyrians themselves were a multicultural empire, and their policies definitely sped up this kind of assimilation. However, some scholars believe that not all the exiles completely lost their identity. It's possible that some managed to maintain some form of community life and religious practice where they were taken. Others might have made their way south and joined the kingdom of Judah. Around the time the northern kingdom fell, and later when Judah itself was conquered by Babylon, some northern Israelites could have moved south and become part of the main Jewish population. For instance, the Bible mentions that during religious reforms, King Hezekiah and King Josiah of Judah invited northern Israelites to celebrate Passover with them, which hints that there were still connections between the north and south. But what's even more fascinating are the various theories about them migrating to even more distant lands. Some traditions and theories suggest that members of the lost tribes might have traveled east along ancient trade routes. Some accounts point to Persia, Central Asia, or even as far as India. And in India, there are indeed some ancient Jewish communities like the Bene Israel who claim to be descendants of the lost tribes. They've lived there for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, and have kept some unique Jewish customs. Other theories look towards Africa. The Beta Israel of Ethiopia, also known as Falashas, have held on to ancient Jewish beliefs and practices for a very long time. Their origins are debated, but one theory connects them to the lost tribe of Dan, or suggests they migrated from Israel early on. And get this, some theorists have even linked the lost tribes to groups over a much wider area from the Pashtun in Afghanistan and Pakistan, some of whom have strong oral traditions of being Bani Israel, children of Israel, and customs similar to ancient Israel, to peoples in the Caucasus region, and even some ancient European groups. Of course, these theories often lack solid archaeological or documentary proof, and are more based on oral histories, cultural similarities, or later interpretations. Claiming the legacy, who are they? It's precisely because of these tangled clues and captivating legends that, all over the world, quite a few communities and individuals openly claim to be descendants of these lost Israelite tribes. We mentioned the Bene Israel of India earlier. Their history goes way back. Their oral tradition says their ancestors were shipwrecked on India's west coast, and the survivors settled there. For generations, they passed down the worship of one true God, observance of the Sabbath, and some Jewish rituals. In more recent times, they reconnected with the broader Jewish world, and a good number of them have moved to Israel. Another community, living in northeastern India and nearby parts of Myanmar, is called the Bnei Minashi, which means children of Manasseh. They strongly believe they're descendants of the tribe of Manasseh, who migrated eastward after being exiled and eventually settled where they are now. They have vivid oral histories about their ancestors coming from Israel, along with unique customs and songs. In recent years, after investigations and recognition by Israel's chief rabbinate, thousands of Bnei Minashi members have moved to Israel. The story of Ethiopia's Beta Israel is just as legendary. In a predominantly Christian country, they tenaciously held on to their ancient Jewish faith, with their own priests, laws, and unique rituals. They firmly believe they are descendants of Israelites from biblical times. In the 1980s and 90s, through the famous Operation Moses and Operation Solomon, the vast majority of the Beta Israel were airlifted to Israel, fulfilling their age-old dream of returning to Zion. The situation with the Pashtun is more complicated. They're one of the main ethnic groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and most are Muslim. However, some of their tribes have traditions that they are descendants of Israel's King Saul, or of Israelite tribes exiled by Assyria. Some of their tribal names, place names, customs, and even physical features have been used as arguments to support this connection. While scholars are generally pretty cautious about these claims, that doesn't stop these oral histories from being passed down through generations within their communities. Of course, besides these well-known groups, there are many smaller communities and even individuals in different corners of the globe who claim a connection to the lost Israelite tribes, based on family legends, cultural traits, or personal conviction. It's hard to give a simple yes or no to these claims. The truth of history is often complex. The power of oral tradition can't be underestimated. And while modern genetic technology offers new perspectives, its interpretation also needs to be handled very carefully. What's really important is that these voices searching for kinship are themselves a very moving part of the lost tribe story. It's all about the search for identity, historical memory, and a sense of belonging, a beacon of faith. In Jewish religious tradition, the lost 10 tribes isn't just some historical cold case, it's a really important theme, packed with deep religious meaning and hope for the future. Many Jewish scholars and devout believers are convinced that when the Messiah comes, that is, when the final redemption arrives, those 10 tribes scattered across the world will be miraculously found and will return to their homeland of Israel. They'll be fully reunited with the southern tribes of Judah and Benjamin, and with Jewish people living all over. This belief in the ultimate great restoration of the Israelite nation is deeply rooted in Jewish sacred texts. For example, in the vast collection of rabbinic writings like the Talmud and the insightful Midrash, you can find tons of prophecies, discussions, and poetic descriptions about the return of the lost tribes. These ancient texts have inspired the Jewish people through more than 2,000 years of diaspora, helping them hold onto an undying hope for their nation's future and God's sacred promises, no matter what hardships they faced. In the prophetic books, like Ezekiel, there's a famous metaphor of two sticks being joined into one, foretelling the eventual unification of Israel representing the northern 10 tribes and Judah representing the south. These passages are understood to mean that in God's plan, not one of the 12 tribes of Israel will be forgotten forever. They will all eventually be regathered and become a complete, unified nation, sharing peace and prosperity in the promised land. This hope goes beyond just bloodlines or geography. It symbolizes a kind of spiritual wholeness and harmony. Where does that leave us? So, when we look again today at this whole phenomenon of the lost 10 tribes of Israel, we're seeing more than just that ancient tragedy from 722 BC. We're seeing a story of questioning, searching, and hoping that's been going on for over 2,700 years. Did these tribes really just vanish without a trace? Or did their genes, culture, and memories somehow blend into the bloodlines of other nations in unexpected ways, or quietly live on in some unknown corner of the world? And those communities around the globe claiming to be their descendants, are their stories just romantic fantasies? Or are they real echoes of distant history playing out today? Maybe the search for answers to these questions is more important than finding one definitive answer, because it touches on themes that are universal to all of us. Themes of homeland, identity, separation, and reunion, memory, and forgetting. It also makes us think about how a people's vitality is kept alive and passed down through the ages. And from a faith perspective, the story of the lost tribes is a profound metaphor for sacred covenants and ultimate redemption. It reminds people that even in the darkest times of exile, the light of hope was never completely extinguished. That ancient hope for an ultimate reunion and restoration still burns in countless hearts, inspiring them to keep searching, connecting, and dreaming. The lost 10 tribes of Israel, their story began with a historical disaster, but their legend has gained an eternal life in human collective memory and in the landscape of faith. These elusive traces, shrouded in mist, will perhaps continue to lead generation after generation to explore the depths of history and to question the meaning of their own existence.